In the beginning, long before cities touched the sky and machines filled the air with sound, the earth belonged only to nature. Vast forests stretched endlessly, rivers carved their way through ancient lands, and the wind carried whispers of a world untouched by human hands. In this world, humans were not rulers. They were survivors. Small, fragile, and uncertain, early humans lived in constant awareness of danger. They had no homes as we know them today, only temporary shelters, caves, rock overhangs, or simple coverings made from branches and leaves. Every day began with a single purpose: to stay alive. A young man named Kale stood at the edge of a rocky cliff, his eyes scanning the open land before him. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and pale orange. Behind him, hidden within the shadows of a cave, a small group of humans stirred awake. Among them was Alara. She stepped quietly toward Kale, her bare feet careful against the cold stone. She did not speak, but her presence was enough. Words were still forming in their world, simple sounds, gestures, shared understanding. Language had not yet fully emerged, but connection already existed. They understood each other. Not through sentences, but through instinct, through shared experience, through survival. The day ahead would be difficult. It always was. Together, they moved into the wilderness, carrying only the simplest tools, sharp stones, wooden sticks, and the strength of their bodies. The land was both provider and threat. Somewhere out there, food existed. But so did predators. Every sound mattered. A rustle in the grass. A distant cry. A sudden silence. They moved carefully, reading the environment like a story written in signs only they could understand. Kale crouched low, examining tracks pressed into the soft earth. Alara watched the horizon, alert and ready. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. Finally, they found what they were looking for, a small animal grazing near a cluster of trees. It was their chance. Kale signaled. The group spread out. Time slowed. A single mistake could cost everything. With a sudden burst of movement, they attacked. The hunt was quick but not easy. When it ended, there was no celebration, only relief. Food meant survival. Survival meant another day. That night, they returned to their shelter. Darkness fell quickly. And with it came fear. The night was alive with unseen threats. Strange sounds echoed through the land, and shadows seemed to move with intention. The group huddled together, seeking comfort in closeness. But they had no light. No protection. Only the darkness. And then, one night, something changed. A storm rolled across the sky, fierce and violent. Thunder roared like a living creature, and lightning split the heavens with blinding flashes. Rain poured down, soaking the earth. Then it happened. A bolt of lightning struck a tree in the distance. Fire erupted. At first, they were terrified. The flames moved unpredictably, consuming everything in their path. The heat was intense, the light overwhelming. They stayed away. Watching. Waiting. The fire eventually died down, leaving behind charred remains and glowing embers. Days later, Kale returned to that place. The fear had not disappeared, but something else had taken its place. Curiosity. He approached slowly. Carefully. Using a long branch, he touched one of the remaining embers. It glowed brighter, then dimmed again. It was alive, but not like an animal. It could be controlled. That moment changed everything. Kale carried a burning branch back to the cave. At first, the others recoiled. But slowly, they gathered closer. The warmth was undeniable. The light pushed back the darkness. For the first time, night was no longer absolute. They fed the fire with dry wood, learning through trial and error how to keep it alive. Over time, they discovered its many uses. It provided warmth in the cold. It scared away predators. It transformed raw meat into something softer, safer to eat. But perhaps its greatest gift was something less obvious. It brought them together. They sat around the fire, watching the flames dance. In that quiet light, something new began to grow: communication. Simple sounds became patterns. Patterns became meaning. Meaning became language. Stories were born. Time passed. Generations came and went. The world slowly began to change, not because nature had shifted, but because humans had. They were learning, adapting, evolving. One day, Alara noticed something unusual. Near their shelter, small plants had begun to grow where seeds had fallen. At first, it seemed like coincidence. But over time, a pattern emerged. Seeds became plants. Plants became food. The idea was simple. But its impact was enormous. Humans began to plant intentionally. Instead of searching endlessly for food, they started to create it. They chose fertile land, returned to the same places, and stayed longer than ever before. Kale built simple structures using wood and stone. Alara developed tools for harvesting and preparing food. Others joined them. A temporary group became a permanent settlement. For the first time in history, humans were not just surviving. They were living. Children were born into a world that was slightly safer than before. They did not need to wander as much. They learned from those who came before them. Knowledge was no longer lost with each generation. It was passed on. Improved. Expanded. Years turned into decades. The settlement grew. Huts became stronger. Paths formed between them. Humans began to specialize. Some focused on farming, others on crafting tools, others on protecting the group. Cooperation became essential. With stability came new possibilities. People began to think beyond survival. They began to create. Art appeared: simple carvings, drawings on stone walls, symbols that carried meaning. Music emerged in the form of rhythm, of repeated sound, of shared expression. Humanity was discovering itself. But with growth came new challenges. Other groups existed. Other settlements. And not all interactions were peaceful. Resources were limited. Land was valuable. Conflicts began to arise. At first, they were small disputes, misunderstandings. But over time, they grew into something larger. Organized. Intentional. War. Kale, now older, stood once again at the edge of danger. But this time, he was not alone. Behind him stood a community, stronger, wiser, more capable. They had built something worth protecting. The conflict was difficult. Loss was inevitable. But something had changed. Humans were no longer powerless. They could defend. They could plan. They could endure. Time continued forward, unstoppable. Generations passed. The world evolved. Villages became towns. Towns became cities. Humans developed writing, symbols that could capture thoughts and preserve them beyond memory. Knowledge could now travel across time. Ideas spread. Innovation accelerated. Great civilizations rose, complex societies with structure, leadership, culture. Massive buildings were constructed, not just for survival, but for meaning. Human ambition had awakened. And it would never sleep again. As time moved forward, humanity stepped into a new era, one defined not just by survival or community, but by ambition. The first great civilizations began to rise. Along the banks of mighty rivers, people gathered and built societies that would leave lasting marks on history. The rhythm of life changed. No longer dictated entirely by nature, humans began shaping their own world with intention and vision. Cities grew where once there were only small settlements. Stone replaced wood. Structures rose higher, stronger, more permanent. Kale and Alara were long gone, their names lost to time, but their legacy lived on in every hand that built, every mind that dreamed. In these early civilizations, humans discovered something powerful: the ability to organize. Leaders emerged. Rules were created. Systems formed. People no longer lived only for themselves or their small group. They became part of something larger, a society. With society came structure. With structure came progress. Writing evolved into complex systems, allowing humans to record laws, history, and knowledge. Ideas no longer vanished with memory. They were preserved, studied, and improved. Education was born. Knowledge became power. And with power came competition. Civilizations expanded. Empires formed. Borders stretched across lands, and rulers sought to claim more territory, more resources, more influence. Ambition turned outward. Armies were built. Weapons became more advanced. And war became inevitable. The clash of civilizations echoed across continents. Great empires rose with strength and strategy, only to fall to time, conflict, or their own internal struggles. Yet even in war, humanity continued to learn. They improved their tools, refined their thinking, strengthened their resilience. Each rise and fall was not an end, but a lesson. Between conflicts, there were moments of brilliance. Philosophers questioned existence. Thinkers explored the nature of reality, of life, of purpose. Artists created works that reflected the human spirit, its beauty, its pain, its complexity. Humanity was no longer just building structures. It was building identity. As centuries passed, trade routes connected distant lands. Goods, ideas, and cultures traveled across mountains, deserts, and oceans. The world began to feel smaller. More connected. More complex. But change was coming again, faster than ever before. A quiet shift began, one that would transform everything. The Age of Discovery. Humans looked beyond their known world and asked a simple but powerful question. What lies beyond? Ships were built to travel vast oceans. Brave explorers set sail into the unknown, guided by stars and hope. Some never returned. But those who did, changed history. New lands were discovered. New cultures encountered. New opportunities, and new conflicts, emerged. The world expanded before human eyes. But with expansion came consequences. Cultures clashed. Resources were exploited. Power imbalances grew. Humanity's progress was not without cost. Still, the pace of change did not slow. It accelerated. And then came one of the greatest turning points in human history. The Industrial Revolution. For the first time, machines began to replace manual labor. What once took hours, now took minutes. Factories rose where fields once stood. Cities grew rapidly, filled with people seeking new opportunities. The sound of nature was replaced by the rhythm of machines. Life became faster. More efficient. More demanding. Humanity had entered a new age, an age of production, of innovation, of transformation. But this new world came with its own challenges. Workers labored long hours. Cities became crowded. The gap between wealth and poverty widened. Progress brought both comfort and struggle. Yet again, humanity adapted. It always did. New ideas emerged. Rights were demanded. Societies began to evolve, not just technologically, but socially. Education spread further. Science advanced rapidly. Humans began to understand the world in ways never before imagined. They studied the stars. Explored the depths of the oceans. Unlocked the secrets of matter and energy. The impossible became possible. But as knowledge grew, so did responsibility. The 20th century arrived with both hope and darkness. Technology had advanced to incredible levels. But so had the ability to destroy. Global conflicts erupted, wars unlike anything seen before. Entire nations were drawn into battles that spanned continents. The cost was immense. Lives lost. Cities destroyed. Humanity faced itself and saw both its greatest strength and its deepest flaws. In the aftermath, the world stood still, reflecting, rebuilding, learning. From that destruction came a desire for peace, for cooperation, for a better future. Organizations were formed. Nations began to communicate more openly. The idea of a connected world started to take shape. And then, quietly at first, another revolution began. The digital age. Computers, once large and rare, became smaller, faster, more accessible. Information, once limited, became limitless. The internet connected people across the globe. Distance no longer mattered. Ideas could travel instantly. A voice in one part of the world could be heard everywhere. Humanity had created something extraordinary, a network of knowledge, communication, and possibility. Life changed again. Faster than ever before. People worked differently. Learned differently. Connected differently. The world was no longer just physical. It was digital. And within that digital world, something new began to emerge. Artificial intelligence. Machines that could learn. Adapt. Think. Not like humans, but alongside them. It was a new frontier. One filled with promise and uncertainty. Humanity stood once again at the edge of something unknown. Just like Kale once did, at the edge of the wilderness. But this time, the unknown was not a forest. It was the future itself. And the question remained. What will we become next? Humanity had reached a point unlike any before. For thousands of years, progress had been driven by necessity. Then by curiosity. And now, by possibility. The world was no longer defined by limits. It was defined by choices. Cities glowed at night, brighter than the stars that once guided ancient travelers. Information flowed endlessly, faster than thought itself. Machines worked alongside humans, learning, adapting, evolving. Artificial intelligence was no longer just a tool. It had become a partner. A mirror. A question. It helped humans solve problems once thought impossible. Diseases were cured, systems optimized, knowledge expanded beyond imagination. But with every answer, came a deeper question. What does it mean to be human? In a world where machines can think? Some feared it. Some embraced it. But all understood one thing. Change was inevitable. And once again, humanity stood at the edge of the unknown.